The Deep Space Monitoring Station Helios hums silent against the backdrop of distant stars, its arrays of sensors constantly scanning the cosmic darkness. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes reflecting the shimmer of distant nebulae. 20 years of space exploration had taught her that the universe rarely gave up its secrets easily, but nothing could have prepared her for what those sensors were telling her now. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the station's comm system. "The quantum array is picking up something different." Sarah's boots clicked against the metal floor as she made her way to the central control room. The station's skeleton crew of 12 had been monitoring this sector for months, searching for signs of intelligent life. Now, after countless false alarms and disappointed hopes, they might have found something real. The control room hummed with nervous energy as holographic displays filled the air with cascading data. Rodriguez, a brilliant young physicist with an uncanny ability to spot patterns in chaos, pointed to a particular sequence of numbers that pulsed with an eerie regularity. "It's not random noise," he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "These patterns, they're too precise, too structured. Someone made this." Sarah studied the data, her heart racing despite years of professional detachment. The signal originated from a system nearly 50 light-years distant, in a region of space that had been deemed uninhabitable. Yet there it was, an unmistakable beacon of intelligence. Within hours, the discovery was confirmed by 3 other monitoring stations. Humanity had just received its first definitive proof of alien civilization. The response from Earth Command was swift and decisive. The exploration vessel Odyssey, already equipped for deep space reconnaissance, was immediately reassigned. Sarah found herself transferred from the relative comfort of Helios to command the mission that would make history. The Odyssey's crew of 30 represented the best of humanity, scientists, explorers, and specialists chosen for their expertise and adaptability. As they prepared for the journey, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger than first contact. The ship's quantum drive engaged with a subtle vibration, folding space around them as they began their journey. The technology was still experimental, but it was humanity's best chance at reaching the signal's source within a reasonable time frame. "Navigation confirms we're on course," reported Commander James Walsh, Sarah's second-in-command. "Quantum field stability at 98%. Sarah nodded, watching the distorted space through the bridge's main viewport. "Keep monitoring those field harmonics. Last thing we need is to drop out of key space in the wrong sector." The journey would take 3 months, even with the quantum drive. 3 months of watching, waiting, and wondering what they would find. The signal continued to pulse, growing stronger as they approached its source. 2 months into their journey, everything changed. "Commander." The sensor officer's cry cut through the bridge's quiet routine. Massive gravitational distortion ahead. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. "Full stop. Get us out of Q space." The Odyssey shuddered as it attempted to return to normal space, but the gravitational anomaly had other plans. Space itself seemed to twist around them, the ship's structure groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. Hull integrity at 60%. Engineering's frantic report competed with blaring alarms. "We can't maintain quantum containment." Sarah gripped her command chair as reality bent around them. Emergency protocols. All hands braced for impact. The ship erupted from key space like a cork from a bottle, systems failing across all decks. Through the viewport, Sarah caught her first glimpse of their destination, a planet that shouldn't exist, glowing with an inner light that defied explanation. "Multiple failures across all systems," Walsh reported grimly. "We're caught in the planet's gravitational field." Sarah watched as the mysterious world grew larger in their view. "Begin emergency landing procedures. Get everyone to crash positions." The Odyssey's descent was anything but controlled. The ship's remaining systems struggled against the planet's pull, but it was like fighting against an ocean tide with a paper boat. They struck the atmosphere at the wrong angle, the hull's heat shields barely managing to prevent them from burning up completely. Through skill, luck, and sheer human determination, they managed to guide their crippled vessel to a relatively controlled crash landing in what appeared to be a vast plain of crystal-like structures. As the dust settled around them, Sarah ordered an immediate damage assessment. Life support stable on emergency power, Walsh reported. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4, but containment holds. No casualties, the medical reports several injuries. Sarah stood, ignoring the pain from what she suspected was a cracked rib. Get teams ready for external assessment. Full environmental suits until we confirm atmospheric composition. But before they could begin their survey, the ship's external sensors detected movement. Through the settling debris, figures approached, humanoid in form but moving with an otherworldly grace. They glowed with the same inner light as the planet itself. "My God," Walsh whispered, staring at the scanner display. "They're all female." The beings surrounded their ship, their expressions unreadable. One stepped forward, raising a hand that emanated pure energy. A voice echoed directly in Sarah's mind, bypassing her ears entirely. "You should not have come here," it said. "This world is not for your kind." Sarah realized with growing unease that humanity's first contact was about to become something far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The real question was, had they discovered this civilization, or had they been lured here? As if in answer to her unspoken question, the ship's systems began to power down one by one, trapped by an energy field they couldn't begin to understand. Sarah Chen, veteran of countless space missions, felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that their journey of discovery had just become a fight for survival. The true test of humanity was about to begin. The crystalline walls of the containment chamber pulsed with an inner light that made Sarah's eyes ache. 3 days had passed since their crash landing, and the Luminari, as they called themselves, had separated the Odyssey's crew into different assessment centers. The female crew members were treated with cautious respect, while the men had been taken to a separate facility entirely. Commander Walsh's last words to her echoed in her mind. "Don't let them break us apart, Sarah. Whatever they are, whatever they want, we stay human." The door dissolved into light, and Aria, her assigned cultural liaison, entered. Like all Luminari, she possessed an otherworldly beauty that seemed almost engineered. Perfect symmetry, luminescent skin, and eyes that held centuries of knowledge. "Your adaptation proceeds well," Aria observed, her words forming directly in Sarah's mind. "You show remarkable resilience for an unmodified being." Sarah stood, keeping her voice level despite her growing frustration. "Where are my male crew members? As their commander, I demand to know their status." Aria's expression softened with what might have been pity. "They are being evaluated. Surely you understand that their presence here disturbs the harmony we have maintained for millennia." Harmony. Sarah's diplomatic restraint began to crack. "You've imprisoned half my crew based on their gender. Where I come from, we call that discrimination." "Where you come from," Aria countered, "your species still clings to primitive biological imperatives. We evolved beyond such limitations generations ago." A holographic display materialized between them, showing images of what appeared to be Luminari history. Sarah watched as their civilization transformed from one similar to Earth's to their current state of technological and biological advancement. "We achieved perfection," Aria explained, "by removing the chaos factor from our genetic code. The aggressive tendencies, the emotional instability, all carried within the male genome. Our society has known true peace for over 1,000 years." Sarah felt her skin crawl at the implications. "You didn't evolve. You engineered your cells into this." "We survived." Aria's mental voice carried absolute conviction. "And now we seek to help other species achieve the same enlightenment." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Their signal hadn't been a coincidence. It was a lure, drawing in spacefaring civilizations. The Odyssey's crash hadn't been an accident. It had been a test. But before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The holographic display shifted, showing a disturbance in another section. Sarah's heart leaped when she recognized Commander Walsh's face among a group of escaped prisoners. Aria's serene expression hardened. "Your males prove my point. They resort to violence when contained, unlike your female crew members who showed wisdom in cooperation." "They resort to escape when imprisoned," Sarah corrected. "Any human would." The door dissolved again as security forces rushed past. Sarah caught glimpses of other chambers, other aliens, all female, all from different species. The horrible truth began to dawn on her. The Luminari weren't just one civilization that had modified itself, they were actively converting others. Using the momentary chaos, Sarah managed to access a data terminal. Her years of xenolinguistics helped her decipher enough to understand the facility's true purpose. It wasn't just a containment center, it was a conversion facility. "The process is painless," Aria assured her, noticing her discovery. "The male crew members will be transformed, their consciousness preserved but purified. The female crew will be enhanced, elevated to our level of existence. Your species will thank us in time." Sarah's response was cut short by an explosion that rocked the facility. Through the confusion, she caught sight of a familiar face, Dr. Elena Torres, the Odyssey's xenobiologist, working with a group of Luminari wearing different insignias than the security forces. Resistance. Even in this supposedly perfect society, there were those who questioned the status quo. The next few minutes passed in a blur of action. Power fluctuations caused by the explosion weakened the containment fields. Sarah, trained in both combat and crisis management, didn't hesitate. She incapacitated Aria with a precise strike, proving that primitive human combat skills still had their uses, and made her way through the chaos. She found herself pulled into a hidden passage by Dr. Torres and a Luminari who introduced herself as Vena. Quickly, Vena urged, her mental voice tense. "We haven't much time before they restore full power. Our security systems detected your ship's approach weeks ago," Elena explained as they hurried through the hidden corridors. "The resistance reached out to me during initial processing. Commander, they've been doing this for centuries, drawing in ships, separating crews, converting entire species." Vena's mental voice carried centuries of sorrow. "Some of us remember what we once were, before the Great Purification. We keep the old knowledge, waiting for a chance to restore balance. Your arrival, it could be the catalyst we've waited for." They reached a chamber filled with ancient technology, different from the crystalline architecture of the main facility. Sarah recognized star charts showing hundreds of worlds, all marked as purified or pending. "Earth is on their list," Helena said grimly. "They've been studying us for years, waiting for the right moment. Our quantum drive technology advancing ahead of schedule forced them to accelerate their plans." Sarah's mind raced with the implications. Her ship, her crew, her entire species was in danger. But as she studied the ancient displays, she noticed something the Luminari had overlooked in their pursuit of perfection: patterns of degradation in their genetic modifications. "Their perfect society is failing," Elena confirmed, reading Sarah's expression. "Each generation becomes more unstable. They need new genetic material to survive, but their pride won't let them admit their mistake." Outside, the sounds of fighting continued as Walsh and the other escaped crew members led security forces on a chase through the facility. Sarah knew they needed a plan, not just to escape, but to stop the Luminari from targeting other worlds. "What we need," Sarah said, her commander's training kicking in, "is to show them what true human resilience looks like. Not divided by gender, not purified of our nature, but working together with all our beautiful imperfections." As if in response to her words, the ancient technology around them hummed to life, responding to something in her genetic code. The Luminari had evolved so far from their original form that they could no longer activate their own ancestral systems. Sarah Chen, daughter of Earth, stood among the ruins of an ancient civilization's mistakes and made a decision. They wouldn't just escape, they would show the luminary a better way forward. Human determination had overcome countless challenges throughout history. This would be no different. The real question was how many of the luminary would choose to listen. The ancient archive chamber had become their base of operations, its technology untouched by luminary improvements. Sarah studied the holographic display showing the facility's layout, while around her, an unlikely alliance of humans and rebel luminary planned their next move. Commander Walsh, sporting bruises from his escape, stood beside her. Security patrols have increased tenfold since our breakout. They're scared, Sarah. For the first time in centuries, they're actually scared. Fear leads to desperate actions, Venna cautioned, her mental voice carrying undertones of anxiety. The High Council has initiated Emergency Protocol 7. They're accelerating the conversion process for all detained males. Sarah's jaw tightened. Half her crew was still in luminary custody. Every hour that passed put them at greater risk of being purified, their personalities erased, their bodies transformed into something that matched the luminary's twisted vision of perfection. Dr. Elena Torres burst into the chamber, her usual composed demeanor shaken. "Commander, you need to see this." She connected a data crystal to the ancient interface. "I've decoded more of their genetic research. It's worse than we thought." The display shifted, showing chains of DNA transforming over generations. The luminary's genetic modifications were breaking down at an accelerating rate. Their pursuit of perfection had introduced fatal flaws into their genome, flaws they were desperately trying to fix by absorbing genetic material from other species. "They're not just collecting males for conversion," Elena explained, her voice grim. "They're harvesting genetic data, trying to stabilize their own degrading DNA. But each attempt only accelerates the problem. Within 3 generations, their entire species could become sterile." Which explains that urgency, Sarah concluded. They're not just preserving their way of life anymore, they're fighting for survival. A sudden commotion drew their attention. 2 resistance members dragged in an unconscious luminary security officer. "She was scanning this sector," one reported. "Almost discovered the entrance." Sarah recognized the officer, Aria, her former liaison. As the others moved to restrain her, Sarah held up a hand. "Wait, I have an idea." When Aria regained consciousness, she found herself facing not interrogators, but a display of her own species' genetic degradation. Sarah stood before her, arms crossed. "Your perfect society is dying," Sarah stated flatly. "You can feel it, can't you? The increasing neural degradation, the growing sterility among your youngest generation. Your leaders know the truth but won't admit their mistakes." Aria's mental voice lashed out with surprising emotion. "You understand nothing. Everything we've done was to save ourselves from chaos, from the violence and destruction that males brought to our world." "And now you are destroying yourselves instead," Sarah countered. "Look at the data, Aria, really look at it. Your ancestors' fear of difference, of imperfection, is leading your entire species toward extinction." Something flickered in Aria's luminescent eyes. Doubt, perhaps for the first time in her existence. Sarah pressed her advantage, activating another display showing Earth's genetic diversity. "This is humanity," Sarah continued. "Imperfect, chaotic, sometimes violent, but always adapting, always surviving. Our strength comes from our differences, not from enforced uniformity." "The High Council would never accept this," Aria whispered, but her mental voice had lost its certainty. "The High Council is leading your people to extinction." Commander Walsh stepped forward. "You've seen how we work together. Men and women, different but equal. That's true strength." A sudden alarm cut through the tension. Venna rushed to the ancient console, her movements urgent. "They're flooding the lower levels with conversion nanites. They mean to transform everyone in the facility." Sarah's training kicked in. "Elena, can we reverse the flow?" "Yes, but..." Elena's fingers flew over the console. We'd need direct access to the main environmental controls. They're in the central spire. The most heavily guarded section of the facility, Arya added, then surprised everyone by continuing, but I know a way in. Through the maintenance tunnels. Sarah studied their former captor carefully. Why help us now? Because Arya stood, her perfect posture showing the first signs of human-like uncertainty. I've monitored you since your arrival. You've shown me something I never thought possible: strength through difference, unity without uniformity. Perhaps we were wrong. The next hours were a blur of careful planning and tense execution. Using Arya's access codes and knowledge of patrol patterns, they began moving through the facility's hidden infrastructure. The maintenance tunnels, designed for automated repair units, barely accommodated human-sized occupants. As they crawled through the cramped spaces, Sarah's comm unit picked up scattered transmissions from other parts of the facility. The conversion process had begun, but something was wrong. The Luminari's degrading genetic structure was reacting unexpectedly to their own transformation protocols. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with glowing columns, the environmental control center. But they weren't alone. A squad of Luminari security forces waited, led by a member of the High Council herself. I am Matriarch Selene. The council member's mental voice resonated with authority. You have corrupted our perfect order, introduced chaos into our harmony. This ends now. Sarah stepped forward, holding up a data crystal containing their genetic research. You're right. This ends now. But not the way you think. Around them, the glowing columns began to pulse erratically. The facility's own systems were registering the genetic instability spreading through the Luminari population. Centuries of enforced perfection were unraveling. Your perfection is killing you, Sarah declared, her voice carrying across the chamber. But humanity can help you find a new way forward. If you're willing to accept that different doesn't mean wrong, that strength can come from diversity. The chamber fell silent as ancient machinery hummed to life, responding to the crisis in its own way. The question now was, would the Luminari choose survival through change or extinction through perfection? The storm of change was rising, and its outcome would determine the fate of not just the Luminari, but potentially all spacefaring civilizations. Sarah Chen stood at its center, representing humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to change, and to find unity in diversity. The real battle was about to begin. The environmental control chamber had become a battlefield of ideologies. Matriarch Selene's security forces formed a perfect semicircle, their weapons humming with contained energy. Behind Sarah, her mixed group of human crew members and rebel Luminari held their ground, representing a future that the High Council feared more than extinction itself. Your genetic modifications are failing, Sarah projected her voice across the chamber. The data doesn't lie. Every attempt at conversion accelerates the degradation. You're not achieving perfection, you're engineering your own extinction. Selene's mental voice carried centuries of absolute certainty. Better extinction than regression to chaos. We remember the wars, the violence that males brought to our world. We will not return to that barbarism. The chamber's diagnostic displays told a different story. Red warning indicators spread across the facility's schematics as the conversion nanites encountered increasingly unstable Luminari genetic structures. They were watching a civilization's foundation crumble in real time. Commander. Elena's voice cut through the tension. The nanite concentration in the lower levels is reaching critical levels. If we don't act now, the genetic damage will be irreversible. Sarah met Selene's gaze. Your people are dying. Right now. Not from chaos, not from violence, but from your own fear of imperfection. A tremor ran through the facility. The ancient systems, designed to maintain genetic stability, were fighting against centuries of artificial modification. The Luminari's own technology was turning against them, recognizing their current state as a threat to survival. Commander Walsh stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weapons trained on him. Look at your own history. The archives show that your civilization achieved incredible things before the purification. Art, music, scientific breakthroughs, all born from the interplay of different perspectives. Lies. Selene's mental shout carried such force that several humans staggered. Our ascension came only after we purged the impurities from our society. Then explain this. Arya moved to the central console, her former loyalty to the High Council shattered by truth. Her fingers danced across the controls, bringing up ancient records that had been sealed for centuries. The chamber filled with holograms showing the Luminaries' true history. Not a peaceful ascension, but a coup, a faction of extremists who had used the first crude genetic modifications to force their vision of perfection on others. The violence they claimed to have evolved beyond was the very foundation of their society. By the first light, one of Selene's guards whispered, her weapon lowering slightly. Others followed suit, centuries of conditioning cracking in the face of undeniable truth. Selene raised her hand, energy crackling around her fingers. These records are corrupted. The humans have tainted our ancient systems. Her words cut off as another tremor shook the facility, stronger this time. Warning klaxons blared as the genetic instability reached critical levels in the conversion chambers. The containment fields are failing, Elena reported, her fingers flying over the ancient console. The nanites are mutating, trying to adapt to the genetic instability. They'll consume everything if we don't stop them. Sarah saw their chance, the moment when truth could overcome centuries of dogma. You have a choice, matriarch. Hold on to your illusion of perfection and watch your people die, or accept change and help us save them. The chamber fell silent except for the wail of alarms. In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of not just her crew's survival, but the future of an entire civilization resting on what happened next. Selene's perfect composure cracked, showing fear for the first time. How can we possibly undo centuries of modification? Not undo, Sarah corrected, moving to the central console. Adapt. Human genetic diversity isn't a flaw, it's a survival mechanism. We can use our unmodified DNA as a template to stabilize your people's genetic structure. Not to change you back, but to help you find a new way forward. Another violent tremor rocked the facility. In the lower levels, the conversion chambers began to overload, their desperate attempts to enforce perfection backfiring catastrophically. Commander, Walsh called out, checking readings on a portable scanner. The nanite concentration is approaching lethal levels. Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now. Sarah met Selene's gaze again. You wanted to help other species evolve. Let us help you instead, not to enforce our way of life, but to show you that strength comes in many forms. The next few moments would determine the fate of both humans and Luminari. The facility's systems continued to deteriorate as centuries of artificial perfection began to unravel. Warning lights bathed the chamber in crimson as humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and overcome, faced off against the Luminari's desperate grip on their fading utopia. In the end, it wasn't Sarah's words that broke through centuries of conditioning. It was the sight of Arya, a perfect Luminari, stepping forward to stand with the humans. Others followed, the security force's perfect formation breaking as individual choice overcame programmed responses. Selene watched her perfect order crumble, but in its collapse, she saw something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not the sterile hope of enforced harmony, but the messy, vital hope of genuine change. The override controls, she said finally, her mental voice heavy with the weight of centuries. They're key to council genetic signatures. We can stop the conversion process. But what comes after? Sarah's response was interrupted by a massive explosion from the lower levels. The facility's foundations groaned as ancient systems and modern modifications fought for control. They had won the ideological battle, but the practical fight for survival was just beginning. The breaking point had been reached. Now came the harder task, saving a civilization from its own pursuit of perfection, while racing against time to prevent a catastrophe that could destroy everything, perfect or not. The true test of both species' ability to adapt was about to begin. The facility's emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow as Sarah, Selene, and the unlikely alliance of humans and Luminari raced against time. The lower levels had become a maze of twisted corridors, where centuries of genetic engineering were literally tearing apart at a molecular level. The conversion chambers are reaching critical mass, Elena shouted over the facility's screaming alarms. The nanites aren't just breaking down, they're evolving, trying to fulfill their original programming by any means necessary. Sarah watched as Selene and Ario worked at the ancient control interfaces, their luminescent hands moving with desperate precision. The override process was complex, designed to prevent exactly the kind of revolution they were attempting. "There's something else," Walsh called from another console, his face illuminated by cascading data. "These readings, the facility itself is alive. The whole planet is." Elena rushed to his station, her eyes widening as she interpreted the data. He's right. The crystalline structures, the bioluminescence, this isn't just a planet the Luminaries settled. It's a planet they engineered, just like they engineered themselves. Selene's mental voice carried the weight of revealed truth. The great deception, our greatest achievement, they told us. We didn't just modify ourselves. We modified an entire world to sustain our perfect society. But the planet is rejecting the modifications, Elena continued, her scientific mind racing ahead. Just like your people's genetics are degrading, the planetary engineering is breaking down. The facility's systems aren't just failing, they're being attacked by the planet itself. Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. Through gaps in the crystalline walls, they could see the planet's surface rippling like liquid metal, ancient systems awakening from centuries of enforced sleep. "The first ones," Aria whispered, accessing sealed records. "The original inhabitants of this world, we didn't find an empty planet to colonize. You transformed them," Sarah finished, horror dawning as she understood. The crystalline structures, the bioluminescence, they were a living civilization. Your ancestors didn't just modify themselves, they modified an entire alien species to serve as the foundation of their perfect world. Selene staggered, centuries of certainty crumbling. "No, this cannot be. We were told the world was empty, that we had created paradise from nothing." "Your leaders lied," Walsh said grimly. "Just like they lied about the genetic modifications. They built your perfect society on a foundation of destruction and deception." The facility shuddered again, but this time it felt different. Not an explosion, but a pulse, like a heartbeat. The crystalline walls began to resonate, singing with a frequency that made human teeth ache and caused the Luminari to clutch their heads in pain. "The planet is waking up," Elena breathed, watching her instruments. "The first ones, they weren't destroyed, just dormant. Our presence, the genetic instability, it's disrupting the suppression fields that kept them contained." Sarah's tactical mind raced ahead. They weren't just facing the collapse of Luminary society. They were witnessing the resurrection of an ancient civilization that had every reason to seek revenge. "We need to evacuate," she decided. "Not just this facility, the entire planet. The first ones are reclaiming their world." "No." Selene's mental voice carried both authority and desperation. "This is our home. We cannot simply abandon centuries of." Her words cut off as the crystal walls suddenly became transparent, revealing the true nature of their surroundings. The facility wasn't built on the planet's surface, it was built within a vast, living organism. The crystalline structures were more than just architecture. They were the neural pathways of a planetary consciousness that was finally breaking free. "Commander," Walsh called urgently. "The Odyssey systems are reporting multiple quantum signatures approaching. The distress signal we sent when we crashed, someone heard it." Sarah felt a moment of hope, quickly tempered by new concern. If Earth ships arrived now, They'd be flying into a war zone between an awakening alien consciousness and a dying civilization. "We need to find a way to stabilize both," she declared. "The Luminari's genetic degradation and the planetary awakening. They're connected. Elena, could we use the same principles we developed to help the Luminari to communicate with the first ones?" Elena's eyes lit up with understanding. The ancient systems, they're not just control mechanisms. They're translation matrices. The first ones must have had some way of communicating with other species before the Luminari arrived. The chamber's crystals pulsed with new energy as Elena and Ariel worked to repurpose the facility's systems. Instead of suppressing the planet's consciousness, they would attempt to bridge the gap between three very different species: human, Luminari, and whatever the first ones truly were. "Even if we succeed," Selene said quietly, "nothing will ever be the same." Sarah placed a hand on the matriarch's shoulder, the first physical contact between their species. "Change isn't the enemy, it's the only way forward." The crystal walls hummed with increasing intensity as ancient systems activated in ways their Luminari modifications had never intended. They were about to attempt something unprecedented: a three-way negotiation between a dying utopia, an awakening planet, and humanity's first deep space expedition. The fate of three civilizations hung in the balance, and Sarah Chen found herself at the center of it all, representing humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy: the ability to adapt, to change, and to find hope in the midst of chaos. The Great Deception was ending, but the truth that would replace it remained to be seen. The crystalline chamber had become a nexus of civilizations. As the ancient translation matrices hummed to life, three distinct forms of consciousness converged: the structured thoughts of the Luminari, the quantum-based awareness of the first ones, and the electrochemical signals of human minds. Sarah Chen stood at the interface, her hands pressed against crystals that pulsed with internal light. Through the repurposed systems, she felt the first tentative contact with the planetary consciousness, not words, but pure concepts and emotions that threatened to overwhelm her human mind. "They're angry," she gasped, as Elena and Walsh monitored her vital signs. Millennia of suppression, of being used as living architecture for someone else's utopia. But there's something else: curiosity, about us. The first one's consciousness expanded through the facility's crystal networks, their thoughts manifesting as shifting patterns of light and sound. Through the translation matrix, their story became clear. They were a silicon-based species that had evolved to form a planetary neural network, capable of existing in both crystalline and energy states. They don't want revenge, Sarah realized, interpreting the complex signals. They want understanding, to know why this happened, and to ensure it never happens again. Selene stepped forward, her perfect composure cracking as she faced the truth of her civilization's origins. Through the matrix, she shared the Luminari's own story, not the sanitized version taught for generations, but the raw truth of a species driven by fear to commit unspeakable acts in pursuit of perfection. The chamber resonated with three-way communication as human empathy bridged the gap between ancient wrong and present understanding. The first one's crystalline structures pulsed with new patterns, acknowledging the Luminari's confession while offering something unexpected: forgiveness, coupled with a challenge. "They're proposing a solution," Elena announced, reading the complex data streams. "A true symbiosis, not the forced suppression the Luminari created. They understand genetic engineering better than any of us. They've been doing it at a planetary scale for millions of years." Through the matrix, the first ones shared their knowledge, showing how the Luminari's genetic modifications could be stabilized not by enforcing uniformity, but by embracing controlled variation. The same principles that had allowed the silicon-based life forms to evolve across an entire planet could save the Luminari from their genetic degradation. "But it would mean giving up the idea of perfection," Selene whispered, her mental voice heavy with the weight of choice. "Accepting that change and difference are not just inevitable but necessary." "It means survival," Sarah corrected. "Not just survival, but growth. The very things your ancestors feared: variation, adaptation, the interplay of different perspectives. They're the keys to your future. A new tremor shook the facility, but this time it wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The first ones were reshaping their crystalline networks, creating spaces where three vastly different species could coexist and learn from each other. Commander Walsh's console lit up with urgent signals. The Earth ships are entering orbit. 5 vessels, including the UES Prometheus. They're requesting contact. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. Humanity's first major diplomatic initiative among the stars would be helping to broker peace between a silicon-based planetary consciousness and a genetically engineered civilization that had once tried to remake the galaxy in its own image. "Tell them to hold position," she ordered, "and prepare for the most interesting first contact briefing in human history." The next hours were a blur of diplomatic activity as Sarah, now serving as intermediary between 3 species, helped craft an agreement that would reshape this corner of the galaxy. The first ones would maintain their planetary consciousness while providing space and knowledge to help the luminary transition to a more sustainable form of existence. In return, the luminary would dedicate themselves to undoing the damage their foolish pursuit of perfection had caused across multiple worlds. And humanity. They would serve as witnesses, mediators, and examples of how strength could be found in diversity. The Earth ships in orbit represented every human culture, gender, and perspective, living proof that difference need not lead to destruction. 1 month later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching as the planet below shimmered with new purpose. The crystalline structures now pulsed with 3 distinct energy patterns, representing the unprecedented cooperation between silicon, modified organic, and standard organic life forms. "The Council of Earth has approved the establishment of a permanent diplomatic mission," Walsh reported, joining her at the viewport. "They're calling this the Chen Lumina Accord. Congratulations, Ambassador." Sarah smiled, touched by the honor, but more concerned with the future they were building. The real work is just beginning. The luminary had identified 12 other worlds where they attempted their perfection protocols. "We have a lot of healing to facilitate." Through the viewport, she watched as a shuttle departed the surface, carrying the first group of luminary scientists who would help reverse the damage their ancestors had caused. They were no longer the perfect, uniform beings they had been bred to be. Already, subtle variations were appearing in their appearances and personalities as the first one's genetic stabilization took effect. "You know what the best part is?" Elena asked, joining them with a data pad full of preliminary research results. "The first ones say there are hundreds of silicon-based civilizations out there, waiting to be discovered. Thousands of unique perspectives on life itself." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of both accomplishment and responsibility. Humanity had proven itself not through force of arms or technological superiority, but through their ability to understand, adapt, and bring together different forms of life that had seemed incompatible. "We'll need to establish protocols for future contact situations," Walsh mused. "Not every first contact will involve crystal planets and genetic engineering, but the principles we've learned here." "The principles are always the same," Sarah interrupted gently. "Listen, learn, adapt. Find strength in difference rather than fear it. That's humanity's gift to the galaxy." As if in response to her words, the planet below pulsed with new light patterns, the first one's way of expressing agreement. The message echoed through the ship's communications array, translated into terms each species could understand. "Through diversity, life finds a way. Through understanding, peace endures. Through change, the future unfolds." Sarah Chen smiled, knowing that humanity's real journey among the stars was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy not just of joining the galactic community, but of helping to shape its future. It wasn't perfection they would bring to the cosmos, but something far more valuable: the endless capacity to grow, change, and find strength in the very differences that others feared. The echo of humanity's first major step into the galactic community would resonate through the cosmos for generations to come, carrying a simple but powerful message: In an infinite universe, there is no single path to enlightenment, no perfect form of existence. There is only the courage to change, the wisdom to learn, and the strength to move forward together.